basically what we're going to be going over really quickly is which products require registration. Now, the outline we're going to be going over is a couple definitions I think will be very helpful, especially if you're in your office sitting there and you're looking at a product and you're saying, well, does this product require registration or not? Some of these definitions will help. We'll be going over types of products, what requires registration, a little bit on the Food and Ag Code that you should be well aware of, types of registrations we deal with on a daily basis, and some additional information. We'll do a summary on the back end. Now, what is a pesticide? Well, a lot of people have a close idea what the definition is, but this is what we actually use. And a lot of these slides that that'll be coming up, look at here references, because they'll have the Food and Ag Code or 40 CFR or the state law and regulations, and or reference to our label review manual or desk manual or policy and procedures and what have you. So just keep that in mind that this has a lot more information. What we're presenting here is very general, but hopefully enough detail to help you out. Now, basically, what we're looking at, definition, if it's intended, okay, and that's the big thing, if it's intended to be used to repel, kill, destroy, or mitigate any pests, and then that little kicker right there, or any spray adjuvant, okay. Now that little asterisk is very unique to California only. So the other aspect is, what is a pest, okay? Now I know you're probably looking at me and saying, yeah, I could be a pest. Well, the director goes that way, I could be. But right now we're looking at insect, virus, rodents, bacteria, fungi, weeds, or nematicides or nematodes. The thing is with the Food and Ag Code, it does allow the director to designate other types of organisms or what have you as a pest. But as far as I know, I don't think it's taken that liberty to do that. But these are the main ones that we're dealing with right now. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking at your product, is it a pesticide? Is it mitigating some kind of pest? Pretty strongly that it's going to be considered a pesticide product, and you probably have to go to EPA first to get it registered. Now, types of products that we deal with on a daily basis is quite extensive. We're looking at disinfectants, sanitizers, fungicides, herbicides, insecticides, rodenticides, plant growth and insect growth regulators. And we've got repellents, pheromones. Now here's the unique thing here is the adjuvants. A lot of them are pool products, buffers and what have you. The other really unique thing for California only are structural pest control devices and impregnated materials. Those are they basically, as California only requirement that we require registration here in California versus at the federal level. So as you can see, out of all the information that was presented by Mary Lou and specifically by Ann, this is all encompassing of all the different registration that we deal with on a yearly basis. Okay, now what requires registration again? Well, the easy part, if you obtain a federal registration at US EPA, it's going to require California registration. That's a very easy aspect of looking at it. We always request that if you think your product needs to be registered, contact EPA first to get their designation first. Again, whatever they come up with, if they say for some reason it doesn't require registration, documentation, this whole thing with this documentation, in this regards, data, what have you, is very important. Again, adjuvants, if it falls within an adjuvant definition, it's going to be require DPR registration along with what we were saying earlier, impregnated materials and structural devices. Now, Food and Ag Code 12811 that we deal with, in essence, what this is saying is that you as a registrant intend to sell or use your product here in California, it needs to be registered. Now, there are some exceptions to that whole thing, and as you can tell right here, I love the way they write some of this laws up. It exempts dealers and brokers, obviously because they're not the registrant, they're actually selling your product for you. And then also any raw material person that sells it to you manufacturers to create like a manufacturing use product, those people do not require registration here in California. So in essence, bottom line is you're going to sell it in California, or it's going to be used in California. You need to obtain what we call a certificate of registration. Now sometimes you'll hear the term license. Well, really, it's really considered a certificate of registration. We use some of these terminology synonymous with each other, so just be aware of that. It's just a bad habit. But once you talk to us on the phone more often, more interaction, you'll understand where we're coming from. Type of registrations we'll be going over. Registration Section 3, most common that we deal with, California only registrations. We'll be touching a little bit on the emergency exemptions, special local need, minimum risk, and experimental programs. and those are the EUPs and RAs, or experimental use permits, or research authorizations. These are all designated, if you look at it, FIFRA, those are all dealing with what? Federal law, right? So you know more than I do. You guys are smart. Okay, now, quick flow chart, how this whole thing falls together. The most common area that we're doing registration is the basic or primary registrant. Now, some of you folks may be both a primary and a distributor, or have supplemental distributor registrations, but for the most part, a lot of them are primary or basic registrants. We use those two words synonymous again with each other. And then from there, you can register an alternate brand name or additional brand name. And you're wondering, what do you mean we have to register an alternate brand name or additional brand name? Well, in California, we look at each one of those things unique on its own. And so if you want to use an alternate brand name, call it product B for whatever reason, you have to come and secure another registration here in California. Unique thing about that is that it's a little bit different than US EPA, right? US EPA looks at that as all of one product. So all you have to really do is do a notification to EPA and you're on your way. Not here in California. Distributor registrations or supplemental registrations are always going to be based off the primary registration. And then again, just like the basic, distributor registration, can have an alternate or additional brand name, which requires registration on its own again. Now we have master labels. Now some of you folks may be familiar with this. In essence, a master label is going to be registered by the primary, and it's going to be used for supporting either a primary's additional brand name or a distributor registration. And it may have all the uses approved by us, or maybe some of the uses by us. But the thing is, once it's been reviewed by us, it makes it easier for the distributor to come in, or if the primary elects to do additional alternate brand name or additional brand name, they can do that. And basically what we're doing here is reducing the evaluation time, processing time for you. And so it makes it really nice, because some cases, as you're well aware, our processing times seem to be a little bit longer, but in certain cases, you'd be surprised if your submission is put together quite well, that depending on when your RS gets to it, it could go through pretty quickly. California only registrations, this is unique to California only. US EPA does not recognize them, right? Okay, well here in California we do, and it's all based on regulations in California. And one of the biggest things is the definitions, to use as an aid or enhance a pesticide product. And this adjuvant is going to be sold separately from the pesticide product for the most part. Sometimes you guys may put them together as a kit. If we look at that and look at what the adjuvant or perceived adjuvant could be, and we realize that it's not registered here in California, well, we'll take a look at it and what is the intent of that, okay? Some of the things that we look at are wetting agents, spreaders, stickers, water modifiers, it could be defoamers. So there's a gamut of different things that it could be, buffering agents. Emergency exemptions, these are exempt from California and the federal registration process. It's unique on its own. In essence, it allows unregistered use of a pesticide product. And the biggest thing here is whether it's a tolerance exempt or if the tolerance is either exempt or no tolerance. In essence, normally that's going to be on a food or feed use commodity. And so if there is no tolerance or exemption, it's probably going to fall within this use pattern. Now, there's some other differences, exceptions to that, but we're not going to go into great detail on that, only because this is not really the forum for that. But there is some additional information here in our guides for that. And there will be some contact reference people in our books that you could call if you have some additional information on that. Or if we have time on the back end, we can dwell a little bit more on that. Special local need, again, the intent of that whole thing is to add or allow additional uses of a pesticide. We approve it first, and then we submit it to US EPA for their final, well, I won't say final approval, but for their comments. They have 90 days to comment on that, disapprove, add additional requirements. Now, as for the 18s previously, we submit those back to EPA, and they have to approve those before, or accept it before we can actually issue it for use out in the field. Little difference there. Minimum risk, our queen bee on that whole minimum risk, if you have any questions, is Miss Jolene over there. She's been doing those things for how many years now? Oh, wow. Quite a few years. So she knows all about that. Again, that's a section within FIFRA. But there's some conditions. Oops, sorry about that. Oh, here we go. Some conditions and it's dealing with the active ingredient errors, listing of the ingredients on the label. So there's some criteria there that it has to comply with. And again, it's dealing with the Section 3 CC&Rs pertaining to exempt pesticide products too. We do have within our regulations that are a little bit outside federally that, in essence, like in this case here, if it's greater than 1% citronella, then that product would require registration here in California. Experimental programs. In essence, experimental programs, EUPs, research authorizations, they're really intended to gather additional information, data such as efficacy and or phytotox data for the most part, and that's to support your product registration here in California, or maybe expand the use of your product that's already registered here in California. Maybe you want to add another crop, or for whatever reason, a pest. You need that data to be, supported, because remember, we'll get into it a little bit later, the data needs to be generated in California or California-like conditions. And again, experimental programs, they must follow the labeling as such. Now, experimental use permit, this is the federal EUP. The unique thing about that, once you go to USCPA and obtain the federal EUP, you can allow over 10 acres. It depends on what the federal EUP, what they designate. And normally it's up to 1 year. And unless you register it here in California, you cannot sell it or distribute it except to the research participants. And usually when you obtain a EUP, federal EUP, they're going to establish a temporary tolerance or exemption from that if it's for a food or feed crop. Otherwise, if there is no tolerance established, temporary tolerance established or exemption, then you have to do a crop destruct. Or you can feed it to research or experimental animals. And I'm sure that those animals will be destroyed too down the road. So there's no way of those treated crops underneath these research authorizations, the EUPs will be into the channels of trade. And then again, if it does become registered here in California, they're all considered conditional registrations. RAs, research authorizations, anything less than 10 acres. So it's a little bit different. Unique thing here is that if you do obtain a federal EUP and you don't want to register it, you could go ahead and use it for a RA. RAs, again, don't require federal registration, but they are limited to 10 acres or less. And the product cannot be sold for experimental use. And that's the other kicker. And other than that, they have to keep in close contact with the California County Ag Commissioner's office too. And again, very similar to the EUP, no tolerance or exemption has to be crop destruct or fed to experimental animals. Yeah, go ahead.
10 acres for each crop or for all the crops?
Well, no, it doesn't matter what crop you're.
John, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. She wants to know if it's for each crop or different crops, or is that correct?
That's the way we work here.
Yeah. Hey, it's all this new technology. I'm not used to that, what the heck? I've been here 100 years. And so, yeah, it's very crop specific. So if you get an EUP, it's going to be for that specific crop. So they're very specific. So if you're going to do multiple crops, I've yet to see a EUP for crop grouping. Normally the ones we run across are usually crop specific. That doesn't mean that USCPA may not do that, but I just haven't seen that yet. And then additional information, we can go over the concurrent submissions a little bit, conditional registrations, new active ingredients, technical grade active ingredients, and manufacturing use products. Concurrent submissions, in essence, this is where you're submitting the product to USCPA, and now you want to submit to California to be reviewed at the same time concurrently, right? Well, there's certain criteria that needs to fall into. In essence, if you look at these first 4 items here, that if your product falls within that, we're going to do it automatically concurrently. The thing is, on the other submissions, which we do have quite a few that don't fall within here, but they like to have the product reviewed concurrently, what you need to do is submit a letter directly to branch chief and preacher over here. You got to make a good, state your argument, state your position, and make a good argument, and she'll take a look at that and consider that. Will your product, fit the criteria of concurrent review? And then she'll write back to you. Do not submit a package to us with the letter requesting concurrent review. Just do not do that. Once you receive the letter back, if it's positive, then go ahead and submit concurrent review along with the letter from Ann accepting it. And then also, if for some reason the letter comes back negatively, then obviously we're not going to do it concurrently. You just submit it as a regular submission, and it'll go on to the review process as a first come, first served type basis. Oh.
Here, I'm coming.
Morning. Okay.
Just a clarifying question on that. The pre-submission of the request for concurrent is only if you're applying under condition 5. Like if you have a new active ingredient, do you still have to ask ahead of time?
No, you don't need to. It's only 5 when you're going to ask before you're going to submit the application.
And they reiterate what John said. One of the most important things to do is if you're going for criteria number 5, branch chief approval, make the best argument you can in writing. Sometimes we'll get the argument or the request saying, hey, we would like a concurrent submission, period. Here's my label, period. We need to know more information before we can do that. So make your best argument.
Other thing, conditional registration, may run into this every now and then, not necessarily all the time. But basically, conditional registration is when we look at a product registration, section 3, whether it's a primary or a distributor registration sometimes, but more importantly, usually dealing with the primary, that the data that was submitted or that we reviewed, bridged, what have you, may give the evaluator a certain level of confidence that it satisfies their concerns, but not fully. And so they want some additional information done. It could be that another study or test trial to be done, or maybe they need the report to be better written up. But for whatever reason, they could have that comfort level. Okay, well, we do have a level of comfort that it's going to support registration. And so they'll do a conditional, and they'll come out with the evaluation memo stipulating what those conditions are. That information will be immediately conveyed over to you by the various RSs. Now, data generation, usually when you get that memo, it's based on a 1-year time period. Now, the thing is, we, regulatory-wise, have the abilities to go out to at least 3 years. But the thing is, to do that first year, if for some reason you can't make those conditions, generate that data, you have to give us a really good argument in a letter why we should extend it for another year, okay? Fact is that you just forgot is not necessarily good. So just be aware of that. Now, if you were saying that the lab burned down or something like that, versus the dog ate the report, we might consider that. So just be aware of that. You have to make a good, strong argument. Again, annual progress report is going to be required towards the end of the year before renewal time. And then the other aspect too, sometimes on the EPA stamp label that you get back on the comment letter, sometimes they'll state in the upper right-hand corner, I think it was, registered conditionally. Well, just because EPA does that on their end, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to follow suit. It's all based on the data that we're looking at. Dealing with new active ingredients, there's some new nuances here too. Steve Rhodes, he's in our reference book. If you have any questions dealing with the new active ingredients, contact Steve.
You could also talk to Hyatt Ford in the back.
Oh, that's true too. Excuse me, Hyatt, sorry about that. So you stand up and say, hey, or me. There you go. Technical grade, manufacturing use in California. The thing that's unique about this, we do register those in California, but they're not going to have any use rates on that, so just be aware of that. Sometimes you'll see a manufacturing use label, and it'll state crops and stuff like that, but as for the actual use rates stating, a certain amount of product to be used per acre or stuff like that, I have never seen that done. So in essence, it's just to be used for formulating the products here in California, if that's the intent. Now, if for some reason you're generating that product here in California with the intent of moving it out of state to Nevada, Louisiana, what have you, for in-use formulation down there, that's acceptable. It doesn't require registration. I highly recommend you contact our enforcement branch just to make sure that what you plan on doing is all right with them. They may have specific criteria on how you have to label the product or what have you, but again, enforcement, they're more privy to that. I'm not going to get into great detail on that, but just contact our enforcement personnel. I think we may have enforcement contacts in that reference too. If not, let us know, or we'll check a little bit later on that. And again, like I was saying earlier, the label really does not have any in-use product or in-use instructions. Oh, look at that, got it to work.
On your new actives, it stated not currently registered. Is that not currently registered in California? Go back.
Yes, the new active ingredients, it's an active ingredient that's never been registered in California before.
It could be federally
It can be federally registered. It has to be
Right.
federally registered.
Or it could not be
but
federally registered or California registered, so.
Hold on, Eileen?
Not now registered in California. It may have been registered. It's no longer registered.
Yes, yeah.
That's
So
good.
it could have
That's a good
been,
point.
it could have been registered in the past, but it's been unregistered in California for over 1 year, and then he'll have to come back in as a new active.
And in summary, this is just a quick table up here, just to compare between US EPA and DPR. Probably one of the biggest things is right down here, structural pest control devices and impregnated materials. We're talking about like shirts, REI. We do look at those. US EPA doesn't. One unique thing here, and I'm not sure if you guys have questions on that, but plant incorporated protectants, PIP, EPA does and do regulate those. That's like the BT cotton, okay? Here in California, at this point in time, we don't. So just be aware of that. Sometimes we'll get questions, well, can it be used in California? From my understanding, with enforcement, it's perfectly fine, but we're not going to regulate it.